The Voice Behind the Call, a psychological horror story. Welcome back to Magic Verse, where we unravel the darkest mysteries and eerie tales that send shivers down your spine. Tonight we bring you a terrifying story, a journalist, a series of mysterious phone calls, and a chilling truth that should have remained buried. What if your own voice called you in the middle of the night? What if the voice wasn't just an echo, but a warning? Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and let's dive into The Voice Behind the Call, the first call. Samantha had never been the kind of person to scare easily. As a journalist, she had spent years chasing mysteries, uncovering hidden truths, and exposing lies. Fear was just another emotion to be analyzed and understood, not something that controlled her. But that night, when her phone rang for the third time in a week, again in the dead of night, she felt something unfamiliar slither into her chest. Unease. The screen glowed in the darkness, illuminating her dimly lit apartment. The caller ID was the same as before. No caller ID, she hesitated, her fingers hovering over the screen. The rational part of her brain said it was probably a prank, a wrong number, or some telemarketer with a broken dialer. But another part, the instinctual, primal part, whispered that something was wrong. She took a deep breath and answered. "Hello." Silence. Then the breathing started, slow, rhythmic, deep inhalations, just loud enough for her to hear, as if the person on the other end was standing right beside her. It wasn't aggressive, not threatening, but it was too close, too real. Samantha sat up in bed, her heart picking up speed. "Who is this?" she demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. "No," response. "Just the breathing." She held the phone away from her ear for a second, staring at the screen, half expecting to see a video call showing someone lurking in her apartment. But there was nothing. Just the blank, nameless caller ID, the breathing, continued. With a frustrated huff, she hung up and tossed the phone onto the nightstand. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe it was just some creep getting off on scaring people. But as she lay back down, pulling the blanket up to her chest, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. That something, someone, was still listening. The mystery deepens. The next night, Samantha tried to ignore the creeping anxiety as she settled into bed. She had convinced herself that the call had been a mistake, some random number glitch, or a bored prankster looking for attention. But deep down, she knew she was lying to herself. When the clock struck 2:13 a.m., her phone screen lit up. No caller ID. Her breath hitched. She had been expecting it, yet seeing the notification sent a cold shiver down her spine. She hesitated, fingers hovering over the screen. Should she answer? Should she block the number? Or should she simply turn the phone off and pretend none of this was happening? A part of her wanted to ignore it, but the journalist in her, the part that always sought the truth, no matter how, terrifying, refused to let it go. She answered. "Who are you?" she asked immediately, her voice firm. Silence. Then the breathing returned, slow, rhythmic, closer. She closed her eyes, listening carefully. This time, the sound wasn't just breath. It was wet, as if the person on the other end had just emerged from water, their lungs heavy with moisture. Samantha's stomach twisted. "Say something," she demanded, gripping the phone tighter. For the first time, a sound, soft, barely above a whisper, her own voice. "Who are you?" Her pulse thundered in her ears. She pulled the phone away, staring at the screen in disbelief. The voice had been hers. Exactly hers. The tone, the inflection. It wasn't just an imitation. It was a perfect replica. She hung up, her breathing ragged. What the hell was happening? The investigation begins. Sleep was impossible after that. The moment she closed her eyes, she imagined someone standing at the foot of her bed, breathing softly in the dark. By morning, she was exhausted but determined. She needed answers. She dialed her service provider. "Hi, I need to trace a number. That keeps calling me at night." "Certainly, ma'am. What's the number?" It comes up as no caller ID. There was a pause. "I'm sorry, but if there's no visible number, we can't track it. It doesn't exist in our records." Samantha gritted her teeth. "That's impossible. Someone is calling me." The operator hesitated. "The only possibility is if it's coming from an inactive line. Something disconnected. But even then, it wouldn't be able to make calls." Samantha's fingers tightened around the phone. A disconnected line? A dead number? Her stomach churned as she pulled out her laptop. If the phone company couldn't help, she'd have to do it herself. She typed the words into the search bar. Mysterious phone calls from no caller ID. Most of the results were urban legends, ghost stories, and cheap paranormal blog posts. But one article caught her attention. A case from 10 years ago. A woman named Elena Carter had filed multiple police reports about receiving disturbing phone calls. She had claimed that a voice, her own voice, was calling her in the dead of night. Her last call to 911 had ended with a blood-curdling scream. Her body was never found. Samantha stared at the screen, her blood running cold. Her phone vibrated. No. Caller ID, and this time, she didn't want to answer. The descent into fear. Samantha's hands trembled as she turned her phone face down on the table, as if simply looking at it would invite something terrible. She wasn't imagining this. She wasn't dreaming. Someone, or something, was calling her. She stared at the old newspaper article on her laptop screen. Elena Carter, a journalist, missing since 2013. Her last call to 911 had ended mid-sentence. A scream, followed by static. No body, no traces, nothing. Samantha clenched her jaw. She couldn't ignore the similarities. Elena had been a journalist. She had received the same eerie calls. She had disappeared. And now Samantha was next. Her phone vibrated again. No caller ID. Every fiber of her being screamed at her not to answer. But something deep inside her, a force she couldn't explain, urged her to pick up. She reached out, fingers trembling, and answered. "Samantha, don't turn around." Her breath caught in her throat. It was her own voice. But this time, the words weren't just a repetition. It was a warning. And then, she felt it. A breath. Cold. Damp. Right behind her. The room, which had been silent apart from her ragged breathing, was suddenly filled with an unbearable humming sound. Low, droning, vibrating deep inside her skull. Her hands clenched into fists. She wasn't alone. But she couldn't turn around. She wouldn't. Then something impossible happened. The voice on the phone changed. It was no longer hers. It was someone else. A woman's whisper, distant and broken. "Don't make the same mistake I did." Samantha's blood turned to ice. "Elena." The call cut off. For a long moment, Samantha sat frozen, her body paralyzed with fear. And then, her phone buzzed again. But this time, it wasn't a call. It was a voicemail. Shaking, she pressed play. Silence. Then, the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming closer. And then, in a voice not her own, but not entirely unfamiliar. "Turn around." A shadow flickered against the wall, and the screen went black. And just like that, the call went silent. But the question remains. Who was really on the other end of the line? And if Samantha never turned around, what would have happened. Some mysteries are never meant to be solved. If you enjoyed this chilling story, make sure to subscribe for more terrifying tales. And tell us in the comments. Would you answer the call? Until next time, sleep well if you can.